TV talking about NAFTA, and I knew what this unfair trade that they mislabel free trade does to both people in America and the people that we're making the treaties with, I'm like, to me, that finally did it for me. I said, these are not my values. This person does not speak for me. I can't be working in this party anymore. And I just left to no party for a while because I didn't know about the Green Party. It wasn't like I just switched because it was an angry reaction from one to the other. I just left. I knew the Republicans, from what I'd seen of them, definitely didn't speak to those values either. So I think the values are very different. Now, everybody in every party thinks, I have good friends that are libertarians, and they honestly believe that in terms of small government, less taxes, they have the honest belief that that helps people. And maybe the people in the Democratic and Republican parties actually believe the choices they make help people. I can't speak for them. I know the libertarians who are in third parties here locally, we work together with them often. I mean, we work against government abuses, we work against corporate abuses, we work on ballot access issues, which all third parties get hurt by. So, but there are differences, and I would tell people, go and investigate and see who really represents your values, because it's a choice you can make.
This is the question I want to ask you.
Sure.
In light of what you just said about war, is there any time where war is justified? In other words, Hitler was raising hell in Europe. We all know what he could have done. If some enemy was attacking the borders of the United States, would that be a justification for us to be at war?
You know, it's a difficult question, and historically you look at things, and for instance, Hitler's rise was because of the Treaty of Versailles, which is the same thing we've done over and over again. We beat people so far. He was able to rise because we beat the German people into the ground so far after the end of World War I that they were so open to something that was so awful and evil because it was a way for them to think they got their self-respect. And what they did to people, nobody could justify. But I don't have the complete answer. That's not an easy question to answer. But I'll tell you, the vast majorities, I would say every war that we have been in, at least since World War II, I can't think of one that's been justified. Korea, Vietnam, the small countries around the world, the Grenada that we invaded. I mean, and many times it's because of things of our own creation. Often we prop up people who do awful things to their own people, like Saddam Hussein, who did awful things to his people, but there's a picture of Rumsfeld shaking his hand and handing him a cake. You know, we build these awful people. We taught Osama bin Laden how to be a terrorist because we wanted him to do it against the Russians. Yeah. We were convinced that the weapons of mass destruction were still there because we sold them to the Iraqis. You know, and as an American, saying these things is so painful. It's so awful to think that this is what your tax dollars went to. That this is what the people that you hope and pray that you put in office are there to do good things for you and your families and your friends allow to happen. Now, I'm sure they believe that they were doing these things for the good and protection of people. But after a while, when you look at history, you see over and over again, when you finance this kind of violence, it doesn't help. There's no reason for America to be the greatest arms dealer in the world. We shouldn't. We're supposedly the most brilliant nation in the world with so much innovation. Shouldn't we be the greengrocer of the world? Shouldn't we be the solar exporter of the world? Shouldn't we be, the medicine cabinet of the world? Every time we export arms, how do we know they're not going to be used against an American? How do we know every bullet's not going to be shot against one of our own people? Much less killing any other human being. Is that a cost we really want? I mean, it's time that we have more nuclear arms than the rest of the world put together. do we really need that? Do we need that fear constantly sitting there? We need to get out of that. I mean, we've gotten to the point in the world where we can understand it and where the costs are just too high. We need to have that kind of change.
Well, let me ask you
And
this.
that's the best I can answer that question.
That's a good answer. Now, this ties in with that. So where does the Green Party stand on the Iraq War? We'll talk about that right now.
Opposed it since before the get-go.
Right.
I mean, I know I was at a peace vigil, and we'll even go back further than that. I was in a peace vigil in Smithtown when we started bombing Afghanistan. Because, you just know that it's history repeating itself. We haven't solved the problem. And you know what? The point of Afghanistan and the point that so many of us, they try to sell us, though it makes no sense, going into Iraq was Osama bin Laden.
Right.
Has anybody seen him? Has anybody heard anything about getting him lately? I mean, fine, if you say he's the criminal mastermind, which is the official conspiracy theory for 9/11, and that's what it is, it's a conspiracy theory. We haven't had a trial, we haven't proved it. Then let's show the world that we do what we say, bring him to justice, have a trial, deal with it. But we haven't done that. Instead, a lot of Afghanis have died.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have died.
Yes.
We've turned Iraq into a hotbed of terrorism. Believe it or not, I mean, Iraq was pretty much a secular country. It wasn't a religious country. Osama bin Laden is a fundamentalist, believes in fundamentalist Islam. He greatly disliked Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was not very religious. He had the dressings of religion. But women in that country were allowed to be educated, were allowed to hold jobs. I mean, the man was a dictator. There was brutality there, yes. But instead, we've now turned this into a country that's a popular hiding place for Al-Qaeda. If Al-Qaeda is our biggest problem, then we have failed there. Because we've turned it into a hotbed and a breeding ground. We have done the best publicity we could do for them. We've turned ourselves into an enemy that's in somebody else's country. I mean, besides the things that we know by now, that there were no weapons of mass destruction there. There was no reason to go in. The Greens were saying that in terms of Iraq. The Greens were saying that from the beginning. We said there's no reason to go in Iraq, that it would be a mistake, that we'd end up in the kind of quagmire we're in. I mean, we had people, Green Party people had no love of Saddam Hussein. We knew about the brutality, but there's a lot of brutal people that the United States are friends with. At the top of most brutal regimes is Saudi Arabia for what they do people. I mean, you steal, they cut off your hand. You try and hijack a plane, they push you out the door while the plane's in midair. I mean, we're now friends with Pakistan. We're now friends with Libya. People don't talk about that much. We're friends with Libya now. Gaddafi went from being worse than Hussein to being our buddy. I mean, we're friends with people who do a lot of awful things. That's a problem. And we were friends with Saddam Hussein because it was convenient, because at that time, Iran was the big enemy. So we decided that we had to build up their neighbor Iraq, no matter the cost to the Iraqis and the Kurds in that country. And we just can't keep doing that. It's what they call in the CIA blowback. And it seems to happen every single time. Every time we pay for violence, we get the violence back. And it's the loss of life in these people's country. It's the loss of life in this country. The Greens have wanted what they always want. We want the soldiers home now. We want the governors of every state to say they want their National Guard home. The purpose of the National Guard was not to be a permanent fighting force in another country.
Exactly.
I mean, imagine if the Louisiana National Guard had been home when Katrina hit.
Yes.
I mean, we all know, God knows the ineptitude of the Bush administration in that, as they sat there for 3 days and watched the picture out the airplane window. But at least Louisiana is a very poor state. They don't have a lot of resources. The people who were stuck in New Orleans, they were stuck there because they didn't have enough money for cars. They had no way to get out. Imagine if you had a National Guard who could have drove buses in to take the people out. They knew it was coming for 3 days. They didn't have the resources there, and the federal government did nothing. We need to get out of Iraq. And I learned this from David McReynolds, who was a Senate candidate for the Green Party, and actually had been a presidential candidate for the Socialists. We do deal with other people. He's actually now an enrolled Green, and was a director of the War Resisters League, brilliant man. And if you look at our American Revolution, the French came and helped us. Theoretically, like we're helping the Iraqi people, right? To bring democracy to Iraq. Theoretically, the French did the same thing to bring democracy in America. If you accept that for the moment, okay? Did the French stay here and build bases? Did they tell us they had to stay here and help us run our government? No, we wanted them out immediately. We wanted to run our own government. Do the French people deserve any less? And you know what? That government fell. People forget. We had the Articles of Confederation. It fell after like 12 years. Our government failed after 12 years. And then the Constitution was written. And there's going to be a problem. There's too much hatred in Iraq. And we're not solving it by having a military there. That has not been a solution. And adding 10, 20,000 more troops, it's not solving it. It's just not doing it. So we should pull out of there. All we're doing is causing more hatred. We're breeding more terrorism. And we're spending all the money that, you know what, they tell us we can't have single-payer national health care. They tell us we can't have it. Imagine if we took all the money we had spent in Iraq. There would be no child dying of a disease. There would be no child hungry in this country.
That's what I wanted to tell the audience. I saw Michael Moore's Sicko, and I think everyone should see that movie, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, healthcare. I like the idea of universal healthcare. So what does the Green Party stand on?
Yeah, and single-payer universal healthcare. Let's be cleaner about this. It's not what, like, they talked about in the Clinton administration where you keep the insurance companies in. The most expensive thing in health, we have some of the most expensive healthcare in the world, and people think that's because we have the best. Guess what? They ranked us.
No.
We don't. We, in the industrialized world, we're near the bottom. Our infant mortality is too high. Our quality of care is too low. We are not getting the best healthcare per dollar. And the problem is the middleman, the insurance companies. If we take them out, then we can deliver health care of higher quality at less cost. And my wife pointed this out. It's a fascinating thing. Do you know we already have, let's say in New York State, 4 or 5 bureaucracies that already deal with health care? If you get injured in a car accident with no-fault insurance, they put you through a whole rigmarole to decide whether you can continue to have health care. If you get hurt on the job, workers' comp decides how much health care you can get. So imagine if we could get rid of all those bureaucracies. So you just deal with one unit. Now people say the government's awful, but the people who say that have no problem spending money at the Pentagon. They never complain about the military budget. They never complain about buying the bombers that even the generals don't want. They seem to think government does it well. And you know what? Social Security that they complain about invests our money at 1/10 of the cost that it would cost you if you had it publicly invested. The government actually runs things pretty efficiently. People forget that. They're huge. We're pretty much the only large industrialized nation that doesn't have some form of universal health care. And it's something we really need here.